A federal judge has just crossed a constitutional red line that no American institution is prepared to absorb quietly. In early January 2026, while a sitting U.S. president was still on trial, witnesses were still under oath, and proceedings were actively underway. Judge Emmet Ma did something no federal judge in American history has ever done. He formally transmitted impeachment evidence directly to the United States Congress before the trial even ended. Not after a verdict, not after sentencing, not after appeals. He did it in the middle of live proceedings while testimony was still being taken and the defendant still held the presidency. That single decision detonated a constitutional shockwave across Washington. If a judge is willing to trigger impeachment mid-trial, the question is no longer whether the evidence is serious, but what the court saw that was so dangerous it could not wait, and who is scrambling behind closed doors right now to stop what comes next. This was not symbolism. It was not political theater. It was a legal alarm bell. The court was signaling that the conduct already documented had crossed the threshold of impeachable high crimes and misdemeanors and now required immediate congressional action. The timing was not coincidental. The referral came less than 24 hours after Donald Trump's entire legal team was physically removed from the courtroom by federal marshals, escorted past cameras in full view of the public after the judge documented repeated lies under oath. Court officials later confirmed what many feared and few expected to hear stated so plainly. The referral involved impeachable conduct directly connected to the case currently before the court. That confirmation alone shattered decades of institutional restraint. But the fallout did not slow. It accelerated. By nightfall, Washington locked down. National Guard units deployed around federal buildings, transportation hubs, and congressional offices. Barricades went up, security checkpoints expanded, intelligence briefings escalated, Republican members of Congress began defecting in real time, and the President of the United States began posting threats of civil war on social media, daring Congress, daring the judiciary, and daring the Constitution itself to act against him. This is the moment the country has arrived at. The spark was the courtroom, but what followed unfolded like a pitched institutional battle rather than a routine legal proceeding. Judge Ma, after weeks of mounting tension, ruled that Trump's attorneys had crossed a line that could not be negotiated away, establishing what he described on the record as a deliberate, coordinated pattern of falsehoods under oath. He cited 17 separate sworn statements that were directly contradicted by documentary evidence, metadata, banking trails, and prior testimony, repeating the number with surgical emphasis before ordering immediate removal. Federal marshals stepped in without pause, escorting the legal team out as cameras captured the humiliation, a visual rupture that alone would normally dominate headlines. Yet this was merely the opening salvo in a much larger confrontation. Instead of pressing forward as if the disruption were procedural noise, the judge widened the battlefield. He drafted a formal transmission framing the conduct not as misconduct to be sanctioned quietly, but as obstruction of justice and perjury rising to the level of impeachable high crimes and misdemeanors. The language was chosen with constitutional precision, signaling that the judiciary was no longer content to contain the conflict within its own walls, but was formally handing the weapon to Congress. The package delivered to the House of Representatives was exhaustive and methodical, combining full courtroom transcripts mapping each alleged lie to contradictory exhibits, financial records tracing a $40 million Saudi-linked payment that prosecutors argue obliterates prior sworn denials, and body camera footage documenting the marshal's intervention, an operational detail that underscored how far the confrontation had escalated. Then came the recordings, treated as the heaviest artillery in this clash. One audio file is said to capture Trump instructing associates to defy court orders. Another allegedly records him addressing federal judges not with abstract political rhetoric, but with personal threats of retaliation and disorder. Every second was sealed, logged, and indexed before being routed to the House Judiciary Committee, creating what legal observers describe as a mid-trial constitutional shock with no modern parallel. Not Watergate, not Nixon, not Clinton, because never before has a sitting federal judge injected the judiciary so directly and forcefully into the impeachment mechanism while proceedings were still live. The separation of powers impact is profound, and it turns a courtroom dispute into a collision with measurable consequences. Here, the confrontation becomes almost tactical. The judiciary deploys evidence, timelines, and sworn records, while Trump's camp counters in the public arena with accusations of overreach and political warfare. Each side hardens positions, each move raises the stakes, and each statement adds fuel to the hostility, as if neither can retreat without surrender. At this point, readers must ask themselves, does this represent a necessary defense of judicial integrity or an unprecedented expansion of judicial power into political territory, and where should the line be drawn when courts believe they are under direct assault? As the dust settles only temporarily and the House weighs its next maneuver, the question lingers whether this clash marks a singular anomaly or the opening of a new era in which trials and impeachments collide in real time. What do you think happens next? Does Congress advance the charges? Or does this confrontation spiral into an even more volatile showdown that redefines the balance between courts, Congress, and the presidency? Congress, however, was not starting from zero. A dormant impeachment resolution, numbered 10235B3, had been sitting untouched since April 2025. 7 articles: bribery tied to emoluments violations, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, contempt of Congress, incitement, tyranny linked to military deployment schemes, violation of the oath of office. For months, it lacked momentum. Roughly 120 co-sponsors, not enough to move. That collapsed overnight. By the morning after Judge Ma's referral, the resolution surged to 220 co-sponsors, a clear majority of the House, enough to impeach immediately. The names being added stunned Washington. Republicans who had defended Trump publicly days earlier flipped without warning. Thomas Massie, Tom Tillis. Lawmakers once loyal now calculating survival. Massie stood before reporters and delivered the sentence no president ever wants to hear from his own party. Resign or face removal. He is unfit. That single statement signaled a structural collapse. Representatives Ro Khanna and Al Green invoked the 72-hour rule, a rarely used procedural weapon designed for moments when delay itself becomes dangerous. The rule forces a floor vote within 3 days. It was filed immediately. By January 11th, the House of Representatives will vote on impeachment. 3 days. That is the window. With 220 co-sponsors already committed, the outcome is no longer in doubt. The only remaining variable is margin. How many Republicans defect and how wide the fracture spreads. Every hour, more lawmakers quietly calculate the cost of staying versus leaving. They see the recordings, they see the transcripts, they see lawyers dragged out of court for perjury. They know defending this on television is no longer possible. At what point does defending a president become defending instability, and has that line already been crossed? Trump's response followed a familiar pattern, but with far greater danger. He flooded Truth Social with non-stop posts, all-caps denunciations, attacks on Judge Ma, claims of conspiracies. Then came the escalation that froze Washington, an explicit threat of civil war if Congress removes him. This is not campaign rhetoric. It is incitement. A sitting president threatening national violence if constitutional processes proceed. Law enforcement classified it as such immediately. Every post is now evidence. Every escalation strengthens the case against him. He is not defending himself. He is documenting his own instability. Washington transformed into a pressure cooker. Pro-Trump groups mobilized, screaming about betrayal and stolen power. Anti-Trump demonstrators demanded immediate removal. Law enforcement presence intensified. Intelligence agencies tracked extremist chatter. The memory of January 6th is not theoretical. It is operational. Pause and consider this. If you were a lawmaker watching a president threaten civil war while facing sworn evidence of obstruction and perjury, would you risk tying your future to him, or would you run? Everything that had been building for months converged into this moment. The recordings, the documents, the rulings, the resignations, the fractures. Impeachment is coming. The 72-hour rule exists for moments exactly like this. Once the House impeaches, the process moves immediately to the Senate. A trial becomes mandatory. The Chief Justice presides. House managers present the evidence in full. Transcripts, recordings, financial trails, body camera footage. Trump's defense, assuming any lawyer is willing to stand beside him, faces sworn testimony and cross-examination. Conviction requires 67 votes, every Democrat plus 18 Republicans. That sounds daunting until you watch what is happening. Senators in swing states are watching the footage and imagining attack ads. Party leadership is furious about the courtroom humiliation. No one wants to defend threats against judges. Even if Trump survives numerically, his authority would be shattered. Governance would become paralysis. Every order challenged. Every decision questioned. Trump himself remains the most volatile factor. His rhetoric has grown increasingly erratic, aggressive, and destabilizing. Civil war language is being treated seriously by law enforcement. That is why the National Guard is deployed, not for optics, but for containment. Agencies are preparing for violence. The next 72 hours are the most dangerous window. Trump knows impeachment is inevitable. When cornered, he escalates. History documents this pattern. Judge Ma's referral does not end with Congress. Evidence has also been forwarded to prosecutors. If investigators establish that Trump directed lawyers to lie under oath, that is suborning perjury. Obstruction carries prison exposure. Witness intimidation does as well. Grand juries are active in multiple jurisdictions. This is constitutional crisis territory, impeachment, criminal prosecution, judicial intervention, and now, quietly but unmistakably, discussions of the 25th Amendment. Cabinet members and the Vice President are reportedly assessing capacity and stability. The mere presence of this conversation reveals the severity of the moment. The Republican Party is fracturing publicly. Loyalists double down. Pragmatists flee. Lawmakers who defect face threats. With elections looming, many see disaster if they remain tied to chaos. Internationally, allies are alarmed. Adversaries are watching. Domestic instability invites global pressure. A federal judge has declared impeachable conduct. A House majority is already on record. The National Guard is deployed. Criminal investigations are accelerating. The president is escalating rhetoric that worsens his exposure. This is not noise. This is convergence. Judge Ma shattered the assumption that courts stay silent while Congress delays. The judicial clock has replaced the political one. Delay is gone. Trump's apocalyptic rhetoric is not persuasion. It is intimidation. Documented intimidation hardens institutions rather than freezing them. Even if Trump survives the Senate, his presidency does not recover. Authority once broken does not reassemble. Contingency planning is everywhere, in agencies, among allies, among lawmakers. This is the collapse of the illusion of untouchability. What remains is process, cold, methodical, relentless process. The countdown is real. The next 72 hours will determine whether constitutional authority still has gravity in the United States. When the House gavels in, members will not vote on loyalty. They will vote on a documented record assembled under oath. There will be no ambiguity, no deniability. The paper trail is complete. This will not feel dramatic. It will feel inevitable. And the final question remains, not just for lawmakers but for the nation watching. When courts, Congress, and the military all activate at once, is this still politics or the early stage of a constitutional breakdown? And when this process ends, what survives after?